Recorded in the darkest dungeons of the basement of Death Studio, Josh, Troy, and Ty present a show dedicated to bringing you, the listener, into the adventure right along with them. Pick up your sword or load your bolt gun, but don't forget your helmet, because it is time for some Playin and Slayin. Live from the BOD studio, it is Playin and Slayin. Oh, that felt like a good intro. Let's take that one and use it for all of 57 episodes. Redub, re-release. But this is episode 57, joined by Josh and Troy. We will find where Bryce is and kidnap him for the next episode to get him back in. Tonight's episode is a little bit different. We kind of went a long format with episode 56 with Meth. And
that's what we're calling it.
Yeah, long format. Yeah. Ton of fun. I think him and I could have probably talked another 2 hours, but you two would have fallen asleep, and as would most of our listeners that aren't used to long format. But tonight we had a chance to sit down with Matt and Marty Forbeck. So Matt Forbeck, New York Times bestselling author, game designer, editor, kind of Renaissance man in the gaming industry, and his son, who are currently working on, but also have a active Kickstarter for Shotguns and Sorcery, a 5th edition source book for the world that Matt created via a cipher system game that's out there, an omnibus of short stories and novellas set in the world of his creation, Shotguns and Sorcery. And he goes on to tell us a little bit more about that, and then he talked a little bit about the design process and just some general questions that we had for him. So it was just a fantastic chance for us to sit down and in this virtual time and space, as they're kind of in the midst of the media blitz for the Kickstarter. Want to thank Jen, DK, close friend, who put us in touch with Matt through some friends and connections that she has. So thanks to Jen for helping us set that up. But that was the show. We got to sit down and talk with them. Anything you guys want to lead into the interview with? In hindsight, it's always fun to do an intro after you record.
No, it was a blast. Yeah, listen in. You're gonna learn a lot. I learned a lot. It was a blast.
Yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge, and Marty too. Kind of telling us about the design process and kind of the history of Matt's career, and yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, very good listen.
So grab a beer, get some popcorn, and then enjoy our talk with Matt and Marty Forbeck. All right, and here we are with Matt and Marty Forbeck. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Playin and Slayin, episode 57. Just great to have you guys on. Wanted to thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
And tonight we're gonna kind of go on a little bit of a tour through your gamer origin stories, kind of some of your experiences in the industry, Matt, and then what we really want to focus on is the Kickstarter that we are rapidly approaching the end of. As of today, I believe I saw you're about 3 times over the goal. So just an awesome success so far for Shotguns and Sorcery, the 5th edition source book.
That's correct. Yeah, we have it ends on the 16th, so about 8 days from now, and about this time of night, I think actually. We'll be wrapping it up. We only ran it for 3 weeks. We wanted to kind of get through. A lot of times Kickstarters are very mushy in the middle, and people don't pay a lot of attention. You spend your entire time going, "Come on, pay attention to me." And it's kind of nice to just run it for 3 weeks instead of 4 or 5.
Yeah, get in, get out, and I think when I've been kind of watching the progress over the last few days. Funded very quickly as well, which was fantastic.
Now blasted out of the gate. We funded in 4 hours, which we were really thrilled about. And since then, of course, all Kickstarters do this. They go whoosh, and then it's like tick, 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 and then whoosh, hopefully at the end too. Hopefully. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how it's going so far. It's not my first time doing a Kickstarter, so I understand there's that lull in the middle. Some people, the first time through, they'll go, "Oh, nobody's paying attention," and then you panic. And you start screeching at people about what they need to do, but it's we're pretty pleased with it. But honestly, if we'd only made $10,000 and eked it out by the end of the whole thing, we'd have still done the book, right? But now we get to actually make sure it's a really good-looking book. Hopefully, put a little jingle in our jeans, as they say too. And help send my kids to college. Marty's already out, but I got 3 more in college.
I came out with debt,
What's that?
I came out with debt too,
Exactly, you did. So let's see if we can retire some of that. That'd be a good thing for you. So
yeah, fantastic. And Marty, I will have some questions about Wisconsin for you at the end, because I'm also an alumnus of the University of Wisconsin. So I'm gonna have to ask your favorite spots, favorite library, restaurant. Might go through a couple there at the end for and anyone that cares about our Badger. World of Badger. So
I love that stuff myself. I went to Michigan, so I grew up in Wisconsin. I went to Michigan, and then we're like, "Do we send Marty to Michigan?" Like, have you seen tuition costs at Michigan? Forget it. Out of state? No.
No reciprocity with Michigan. So
no, definitely not. And Wisconsin's a really damn good deal, honestly. I mean, it's not cheap, but what you get out of it's really fantastic.
Absolutely,
especially for in-state.
Well, you touched on growing up in Wisconsin. So what we're going to do now is something we ask anyone that comes on to Playin and Slayin with us is we kind of equate gamers to superheroes in their own right. So, the best part of every superhero story is kind of the origin story.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is ask each of you, and I'll start, Matt, with you. What is your gamer origin story? Like, when did you get into gaming? And then, how did that transcend to being a career? I mean, ultimately.
Right. Well, I got 2 answers to that. First time I just got into basic games, like, playing games. My family was always into games, like playing Monopoly and Life and, euchre and poker and stuff like that. But I remember I was in the hospital when I was 6 years old with pneumonia, terrible asthma. And I was hospitalized for 2 weeks in an oxygen tent. And our family priest, I was Catholic, came in and gave me last rites, right? And then taught me how to play chess right after that. So that was the dawn of the whole gaming thing. And so I learned how to play chess, and I was doing pretty well. And then when I was in 8th grade, I think, just starting 8th grade or about to start 8th grade, the kids across the street had gotten Dungeons and Dragons in the blue, what they call it, not the Boldface set, but the one before, the Holmes box set, right? With the blue cover and the dragon on the front of the rule book. And his mother had picked it up for him as a Christmas gift on a blue light special at Kmart. And they were trying to figure out a way for us to, like, they had just moved in across the street the year before, and we didn't really know each other that well. And my mom and his mom were like, "We got to figure out a way to get these kids together. What do you got?" And I'm like, "Well, let's throw this silly game at them and see what happens." And man, we got hooked hard, right? I think that first summer we played every day. And then the problem was we would play baseball in the afternoon, Dungeons and Dragons at night. And the problem was that when we got it, we started out with the basic D&D rules, but AD&D was just coming out.
Yep. So
we started using the AD&D monsters and modules. And honestly, if you play basic D&D with AD&D stuff, you get killed really quick. I think we came up with a party like every other day. Right? Like, oh, well, we're all done. Let's go back at it. It didn't stop us at all. It was just total party kill long before we knew what the hell that meant. And then moved on to it. I grew up, I started going to conventions. I grew up in southern Wisconsin in Beloit, little town on the border. And I often tell people that if I'd grown up in LA I probably would have gotten into film. If I'd grown up in New York, I probably would have gotten into traditional publishing. But I grew up 40 miles away from where Dungeons and Dragons was born, essentially, in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So I started going to conventions when I was a kid. Like 13 years old, I met Gary Gygax at a convention, and he signed my one of my books. I forget, it was The Tomb of Horrors, I think, or no, Temple of Elemental Evil in 1982. And then I started going to Gen Con when I was in 82, actually, later that year. And I've been going to every Gen Con since. So that's now 40 years of Gen Con for me, right? Just going year after year. And I started hanging out with a lot of guys at the show. And, you know, I had a mini magazine when I was a kid. I had what would be called a zine nowadays. And I had my own booth at Gen Con when I was 17 years old, trying to sell subscriptions to this, and lasted 2 whole issues before we had to fold because we ran out of money, which was like $1,000 out of my college fund. But I tell you, best tuition money I ever spent. Right? It's just I learned more doing that than I did anything else, and put me on my career path. I ended up meeting a guy named Trey Denning, who would end up bringing me up to Delavan to play test games for a new company had started with Steve Sullivan and Gally Sanchez and a bunch of other people, Andre Hayday, called Pace Setter. And we would play test, you know, they had Chill and Time Ace and Chill, Star Ace, Time Master, a bunch of other games. And then when I went to college, Troy introduced me to a guy named Will Niebling, and that got me into doing sales repping. Will was actually the first vice president at TSR. And after he left them, started doing sales for Mayfair Games, Grenadier Models, Iron Crown Enterprises, Coplow Games, all this kind of stuff. So he would take me to conventions doing that. And from there, I kind of weaseled my way into editing, and then basically made a career out of it. There's a lot more to that story, but it's a long story. It's been fun. But that's basically how I got into gaming, and that's how I got into it professionally. Then, I ended up doing freelancing, and then founded Pinnacle Entertainment Group with Shane Hensley. We did Deadlands and Brave New World up until we started having kids, and then we split up the company. So I came back to Wisconsin with Marty here on my lap. I was actually telling the story, Marty, at the Ed Greenwood chat, and Jeff, where when you were born, Brave New World wasn't out yet. It came out. You were born in 98. Brave New World came out in 99. And there was about 3 months there we were homeless because we tried to move up to Milwaukee, and the place we were going to move into was a shithole. And we decided I couldn't bring an infant son into there. So I say homeless, I was living in my dad's gigantic house with spare bedrooms and a library. It wasn't like in the street or anything.
Without your own individual home.
Yeah, exactly. Technically, your mom has been a homeless liaison for many years. Technically, we were homeless because it wasn't our place, but it wasn't a permanent residence. But yeah, it was like 3 months of basically living in an old bedroom in my dad's house. It was fine. It was, the bedroom we were in, I think, was probably larger than my first apartment. So, so it was a fine place to be. But I remember being in the library. That's what he had, a library, so it was not that terrible. But and we had a computer set up. I had a computer here and a keyboard here. I had Marty as an infant on my lap, and I would reach over him to write Brave New World as he was sleeping, and I would just kind of juggle you with my knees to keep you right to sleep as I was going.
I know exactly what room you're talking about. That room was moldy. That wasn't a good place for
later. That's because they had a leak in the roof later years. But yes, that's how I started out doing that stuff.
That's fantastic. I think that's an awesome segue then, Marty, to your gamer origin story, because it sounds like you might have been doing game design and development as an infant. So that's truly a superpower.
I was 6 months old, but I was reaching over onto the keyboard, plugging in my own notes on Brave New World.
Yeah.
It was really terrible. He didn't credit me or anything.
Actually, you know what though? And again, I told this story to the guys before. But as I was writing that, I needed a character for the example character. So I used Marty as the example character, the player, right? And it was a superhero game. So his name as a superhero was Rebel. And that was used throughout the entire game. I have friends who still meet Marty at Gen Con every year and say, "Hey, Rebel, how you doing?" Right? Marcelo Figueroa used to be with AEG. We'll still call him Rebel every time he sees him. So.
Yeah. But I should have been on the front of the book. I should have been on the front. Right. Thanks doesn't count.
Sorry, Tiger.
Dedication doesn't count.
Next, it was dedicated to you. That's right.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
Well, next time.
I have been playing games since I could basically hold a controller or pencil. So
Nice.
or dice. So I don't know. I could pick out about 15 different points of origin. I'll limit myself to 2, like you did. The very first game I ever remember playing was Sega Bass Fishing for the Sega Dreamcast. I know that I must have been 2.5 years old when that came out. I was 2.5 years old when that came out, so I must have been 2 or 3 when I played it. And literally, that game came with a plastic fishing rod.
Yep.
I spent many, many hours trying to catch a digital fish. And I think I only succeeded a single time. And then they discontinued the Dreamcast, and my father, in his terrible, wrathful, what he calls wisdom, traded in his Sega Dreamcast, his piece of history, for petty cash.
It's probably for diapers and formula.
In order to buy me a baby food or whatever. I could have gone without.
But Marty is not telling you the other trick is that when he was about that age, my wife got pregnant with quadruplets, right? So we actually had 4 kids who are now 19 years old.
They could have gone without too.
They could have gone without too. Yeah, that's a lot of diapers to go without too.
So video games
with our name on it somewhere. Okay?
My entire life, I've been trying to recapture the wonder of catching that first fish.
So let me guess. Are there fishing rules in Shotguns and Sorcery? Any?
No, but there are mermen.
There we go. Yep.
So close enough, I guess. Point number 2. Point number 2, origin point number 2. I didn't really get into sophisticated, like complex games until I was about 10 years old, 11 years old. I guess there was kind of a gap in there. The only games I played between like the ages of like 2 and 10 were like platformers on the Xbox.
Right.
But when I got to be 10 years old, I started playing D&D. It was like the second or third D&D game I ever played was at GaryCon 1. It was with Frank Menser. Frank Menser was my DM, and I played the Temple of Elemental Evil.
No. It was the Palace of the Vampire.
It was the vampire. I have the plaque right over here.
Yeah.
Frank
What's the
Menser's-
name of it? I can't remember. I always blow it.
I always blow it too. Frank
You got the
Menser-
plaque. Look at it. He just took it home with him this last weekend.
I'll go get it. This is terrible radio. I'll go get it.
That was actually his first game ever. It was at GaryCon 1.
Oh wow!
The first time they actually had an official convention. We did GaryCon 0 at the reception that they held after Gary's funeral. But so what does it say? Tiger?
Palace of the Vampire Queen.
Thank you.
On March 6th, 2009. So I was definitely 10 years old.
There you go.
That was like the second D&D game I was ever in. Frank Menser of
That was your
TSR
first
fame.
one, actually.
Excellent.
I don't think we played before that.
Very first, you
I think
think?
it was your first one, yeah.
Excellent,
Wow.
excellent DM, Frank Menser of DSR fame.
That's quite the way to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had
And,
Steve Sullivan at the table, a whole bunch of other fantastic designers. And then Frank gave out certificates for everybody at the end of it, which is what Marty has as his thing right there. So
Yeah.
Great.
Now tabletop games are pretty good, I think.
I think that was the first convention you ever went to as well. Actually.
Yeah. That was
For me,
what
that was
convinced
like
me
coming home,
tabletop
because
games are pretty good.
That convention was held at the American Legion Hall in Lake Geneva, where I had gone to my first convention, the Winter Fantasy, back in like 1981, 82, something like that. And that's actually where they had the reception after Gary's funeral too. So it was a place that was, one of the original Gen Cons had been there back in the day.
Yeah.
So it was a
Yeah,
fantastic place to go.
Yeah, so I'm a little older than these two guys. So Matt, we're pretty close because my first Gen Con was 1983, Parkside University, and then I also went to the Winter Fantasy at the grade school sometime in the 80s, where Frank also was one of a game that he ran there. So Yeah, and then I got to play with him 30 years later at Gamehole Con to kind of close the circle on some of that. So
That's awesome.
definitely, yeah, you guys are bringing back memories because, that's the age when I got into it and started play. So I haven't hit every Gen Con since '83, but I pretty much since the '90s on, I've pretty much been there.
Oh yeah, I never miss it. Actually, at Gamehole Con, I ran into my first ever game master at a game I played at a convention. It was Steve Winter. The guy who did Boot Hill Second Edition, does all tons and tons of D&D stuff over the years. Has actually been my editor for Wizards of the Coast and TSR before that. But I had met him when I was 13 years old playing Boot Hill at Winter Fantasy way back in the day. You get hooked, The funny part is when you grow up, these guys are then suddenly your peers and you're working with them. You're like, and odd, but there you go. It's good.
There's such a rich tradition in Wisconsin, and I mean we're all Wisconsinites here, and the birthplace of Gen Con, and now I think what's really cool to see is Gamehole Con has carved out 7 years in a row. Kind of the gap, the void after Gen Con moved. There was this space for a show to come in, and Gamehole, Alex and those guys have just made something truly unique and focused on all the right stuff from a gaming standpoint, and the way they're doing it.
I absolutely love that show. Those guys, I think it was it 9 this last year. So I think they just did the 9th, right? They skipped one last year. Obviously it was virtual, but as I remember, I think the t-shirt said IX on it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was the 8th. Either way,
it's got to be close there. 8 or 9.
It's somewhere in there. I should look. But, I missed one so far.
They treat their guests like gold, right? They fly them in from around the country. They put them up. Alex has got a restaurant in town where the actual game hole is, which is, the game hole originally was the place where one of their parents' basements where they got together and played D&D. They called it the game hole, which is, it's just got to be the worst name ever. And then nowadays, Alex owns a restaurant called the Free House Pub in Middleton. And the upstairs part of that, they have an upstairs, which I didn't even know this. Yeah. I'd been there years before, but that's where he actually has his D&D collection. He's got one of the best collections in the world, and the place with a big table. He's got like almost a throne that he sits in. He's got the original Forgotten Realms map that Ed Greenwood built for the game. It's just stunning stuff, and really great guys. Him and Andrew Hitchcock and the whole group there really do an amazing job. Really put together a great show.
So speaking of convention play and kind of RPGs, what I want to know about is the Forbeck family campaign. Was there ever like a family game, a campaign as Marty was growing up?
My second and third games were with my dad, and they were not as good as the Frank Mentor one.
That's because I was running you and your friends through this.
My childhood friends were not as good companions as professional game designers.
Hard to believe.
Shocking.
Actually, I remember I wrote that up for, what the hell was the name of
it was a 4th edition adventure.
Right, but it was The Escapist. Actually, I wrote that up as a series of articles for The Escapist about how to teach people how to play 4th edition. And my conclusion was that you needed a computer to make the characters. It was just crazy. And they had some software for it, but it was finicky. So, but yeah, that didn't last too long. And then, we don't really have a campaign at home, even though the kids have been asking for one forever. I keep saying, you're old enough, you can run your own games now. But part of that's because as a game designer, I'm a terrible game player, right? I just basically like to take a game, play it once or twice, figure out how it works, dissect it, and then I move on to the next thing. So I never stick around long enough to get good at a game, right? I'm not very skilled at most games because I'm usually like, this is it. We're going to play this. And then boom, it goes back on the shelf. You can play with your friends, kids.
Yeah, we played D&D a few times at home. It's like one-offs.
Yeah,
we even played Shotguns and Sorcery a couple of times. I ran like the Shotguns and Sorcery 5e stuff while it was in beta with the family, essentially.
Exactly. But there's always this other dynamic when I was proud of you for doing that, because there's a very strange dynamic when you're running it for your younger siblings too.
Yeah.
And they're trying not to punch each other while you're at the table.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and with game design, and I mean a certain amount of play testing, I'm sure too. Like when you're working on your own game, it's not like you're experiencing it as a new look into it. Like you sit down at a table with a game you haven't played, you're so deep into it, and it creates that kind of, it's an interesting dichotomy of like looking at it from the lens of what can I change and adapt versus experiential play and narrative. And
Yeah. And one of the big tricks for playtesting a role-playing game is playtesting a role-playing game sucks, right? Because honestly, if you're a good game master, you can make any rule system work, right? Because you're entertaining. You're telling the story, you're getting everybody to pitch in, play, whatever. That's a whole different set of skills than the actual playing of the game. So you're playtesting a game, you're actually working on the mechanics and trying to see what breaks. And then you have to, so you put people in unusual situations, and the story kind of goes out the window because that's a lot of it's stressing. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, that didn't work. What the hell do I have to do to reinforce this? And so that's one of the reasons I like to do playtesting. I'll set, we do a little bit in the house, and I send it out to other people where I'm not around. And part of that is you're testing not just the rules and the mechanics, but whether or not you've expressed them well enough for people to understand them, right? And so when somebody writes back and says, no, I hated this, and this is this, and you're like, oh, that's because you weren't playing it right. And you're like, well, that's my fault. Shit. I should have done a better job of expressing that. But that's where you find the holes that you're blind to. The things you didn't expect. You can just go, okay, now I understand. Now I know how to rephrase that. Or I didn't think that was going to be a problem, but clearly it was. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk shotguns and sorcery.
Okay.
We talked about the Kickstarter. We will certainly link to that. We hope to have this out here. Obviously, recording today on the 8th with the weekend coming up being the end of it. But let's talk about the world itself. Kind of summarize this for any of our listeners, viewers that may not be familiar. What is fantasy noir and what is shotguns and sorcery?
Want to do this one, Marty? You want me to do it?
No, you take it. It's yours originally.
Right, but you've been doing a great job. Marty and I ran a boatload of games at GameHole. I got to watch him do it as well. He did a fantastic job. But he is right; it is mine originally. Okay, so Shotguns and Sorcery Fantasy Noir is a world in which a zombie apocalypse happened under the leadership of this necromancer called the Ruler of the Dead. This crazed woman sent out the zombies against everybody, chased all the free peoples to essentially what was the Lonely Mountain out of The Hobbit, right? And there's a dragon in there. And the surviving free people show up and say, "Dragon, save us!" And the dragon says, "Well, I will go out there and blast the zombies with fire long enough for you to build a wall. And then I'm going to rule this empire that we've set up here, right? This within this city's wall." So basically, people live now in a place called Dragon Mountain, which is surrounded by a city wall called the Great Circle. And it's run by the Dragon Emperor, sits at the top. And then below that, you get stratified by basically longevity and power. You get the people. So you get the dragon, the elves in the elven reaches, the dwarves in the stronghold, the gnomes in Gnome Town, the hobbits in the big burrow, the humans in the village, and then down right next to the wall where you can still hear the zombies moaning at night and scratching at the walls, you get all the quote unquote evil races that used to be there. So it's the orcs and the goblins and the kobolds and the ogres and everything else that live down in Goblin Town, right down by the edge of the wall. And this is 500 years since the original invasion has passed, but there are still the zombies out there. The Ruler of the Dead is immortal and still plaguing the area. And the dragon occasionally comes out of his spire, his cave at the top to threaten things. But things have gotten a little bit more advanced over the years. So I was comparing this to putting it in a pressure cooker, where a lot of times these fantasy worlds, it seems like they just stay pre-industrial forever, right? It's like, oh yeah, it's been 3 ages of Middle Earth, and still, we don't have a gasoline. We don't know what we're doing. So in this case, they basically started using magic because it kind of permeates everything to substitute for a lot of what we consider tech. So they have glow globes that light the streets that come on at dark. And you can tap if you walk into a room, you can tap a panel and the glow globe comes on above you. If you want to flag a ride, you stick your hand up and a taxi flies down out of the air as a flying carpet to pick you up to bring you to other parts of the city. Weapons have advanced to the point where we actually have like 1910, 1920s type weaponry. So we have shotguns, pistols, rifles, occasional Tommy guns, and machine guns even. But all these things are enchanted too. So you could have weapons that if you tap it on the ground, it reloads instantly, or you can shove in enchanted shells into it so you can fire spells out of your shotgun. And all sorts of wacky stuff like that. So that's Shotguns and Sorcery in a nutshell. It's a really fun area to play in. I originally came up with this as an idea for 3rd edition back when they were doing the World Hunt for 3rd edition, which produced Eberron, right? Which is a great series that I actually wrote a trilogy of novels for. My buddy Keith Baker was the guy who came up with Eberron. And I turned around and said, okay, well, you didn't take mine out of the 10,000 applications. Pick Keith's, that's fine. And I sold it to Mongoose Publishing and was ready to, they had actually licensed it. We're going to do a whole line of books and I was going to write the books. And then my wife got pregnant with quads. And I'm like, well, that's out the window. I got to concentrate on, taking care of children and what other jobs I got going on. And they were perfectly fine about that. And that took till about 10 years later when Robin Laws asked me if I was interested in contributing a short story to this fiction anthology I was doing. And so I dusted off Shotguns and Sorcery and wrote the first story for it, which I just loved. I fell in love with it right away again. And then I wrote another one for the Origins Writers Anthology for the Origins Game Convention. And then I did this crazy thing in 2012 called 12 for 12, where I tried to write 12 novels in a year.
Right? Oh, wow.
And they were 50,000 word novels, which is a little short. Most novels were about 80,000 words, but still qualifies as a novel. And I broke it up into 4 trilogies and ran Kickstarters for each one of them. And the second of those trilogies was Shotguns and Sorcery. So we had this group really enjoyed it. They wanted to turn it into an enhanced ebook where they're going to put in animation and maps and character profiles and music and all sorts of shit. And they went bankrupt before they could pull it off. But the art director over there loved it so much, he bugged me for a year about doing a role-playing game for it. And I was too busy with other stuff and didn't have time to do it. But eventually I just relented and said, okay, Jeremy, you have a publishing company. Why don't you do that? So in 2015, he ran a Kickstarter for the Shotguns and Sorcery role-playing game, which uses the Cypher system from Monty Cook Games. And Monty's an old friend of mine as well. In fact, he edited some of the first RPG books I did, Western Hero and Outlaw, way back in the day for Iron Crown Enterprise. Came out like 91 or 92. And so the guys over at Outland, who were doing their best, they ended up stumbling and not getting the game out for quite a few years, right? They just had some internal problems. And I love them all. They do great work and they did great artwork for it. But as the license was expiring in 2020, I looked at them and they looked at me and I said, do you really want to continue with this? Or do you want to just, you got other projects, maybe you want to, I'll take it back. We'll finish it all up for the previous Kickstarter and then we'll do something else with it. And they said, yeah, that sounds about right. So Marty and I worked on, Marty actually wrote the couple different books for Cypher System and helped me out some bunch of other stuff for it. Exactly. Which were his first real published credits in the gaming industry, which I was happy to have him do. But that was also the reason when I'm like, Marty graduates in 2019, I say, Marty, what do you want to do? He's like, well, I'd like to write games. I'm like, you idiot. What the hell are you thinking? What have I talked about? Yeah, that never gets through. But apparently he thought it was fun what I was doing. So he decided he wanted to have fun too, which I don't blame him for. And so once he finished that stuff with the Cypher system, I set him on doing the 5th edition version of Shotguns and Sorcery. So he did all the mechanics for it, right? Everything for that and did a great job with it. I did a little bit of development work. And then, so about 95% of the text is done right now. The only thing we have to do is I have to write some fiction snippets to lead off every chapter. I'm gonna write brand new stuff for that. And we have a few pieces of artwork that are probably going to, we actually don't know that we need them, but when we lay out the book, I suspect there are going to be places where you say, you know what, we could really use a piece of that. And it's probably going to be like 3 or 4 pages worth of stuff. So again, 95% of the artwork done. So the book is really very close to done. We want to make sure that was the case before we launched the Kickstarter because we didn't want to have a repeat of the previous problem with the previous publisher. And just today, we actually just announced that the guy who wrote the Cypher system rules, Rob Schwalb, is going to come in and help us out with the development of this game as well. He's going to do a development pass on Marty's work and help polish it up. So, and as I explained to Marty, this is what you do. Because it's bad to design in a vacuum. It's good to hire in experts who know exactly what the system's doing, how it can break in different ways, and have them say, "Oh, I see what you're trying to do here. Let me see if we can make it even better." Right. Yeah, so that's what we're bringing Rob in for.
Rob we did the same thing. He wrote the rules for the original book.
Yeah, he wrote the rules for the original Cypher system, so he's great for that. We did the same thing when Marty did the Pathfinder conversion for us too, that we released as part of the previous Kickstarter, and we brought in Owen Seiler for that one. And Owen's a great, worked for Paizo for many years, knows Pathfinder backwards and forwards, and that's mostly because I was hiring these guys to cover for me. I don't know those systems as well as they do, so I was going to be as good a developer as they could be. So it was worthwhile to bring them in and have them help us out with their expertise in that. And honestly, you're not going to find 2 guys who know those systems better in the world, right? Rob is one of the original designers for 5th edition and worked on 4th edition as well. and did a shitload of stuff for third edition. Plus, he's just a great game designer with Shadow of the Demon Lord and Apocalyptic and all sorts of other great stuff. And Owen, again, knows Pathfinder probably as well as anybody in the world. So I was really happy to have them on board and just make sure, because when you do this stuff creatively, you just want to make sure you're doing it right. So when it goes out to people, they don't say, "What the hell are you thinking?" And then you're like, "Oh, well, I was thinking this." But if you got somebody who's been doing this professionally, they can help you out, make sure that it's all as clean and polished as can be before it goes out.
So Marty, with the 5th edition kind of conversion into that rule set, I guess if you had to say, like, what was the hardest part about that, taking the shotguns and sorcery setting and adapting it? Because D&D, I mean, has high fantasy, high magic, swords, sorcery, but shotguns, was it some of that, like the gunplay, or were there other aspects that were more difficult in the converting to the 5th edition rule set?
I mean, the gunplay rules were tricky because mostly on account of the number of guns, because 5th edition already has rules for guns buried deep in the Dungeon Master's
in
Guide.
The DM's Guide, yeah, there's that page or two.
Because of the sort of hard-boiled nature of this setting, we wanted to tweak them and make small changes. And with obviously, we want a shotgun to play a little bit different from like a revolver. The DM's Guide is just like, well, they all fire the same way. The biggest, the hardest part of the conversion was really just like, Cipher system is a very mechanically not simple system, but it's cut down compared to something like D&D, which is all about adding numbers and lots of numbers and all that. And for this conversion, we wanted to take every single item and gun and character from the Cipher system game, and then add more on top of that and give them all fully fleshed out stats for 5e. And that took a long time. That's like that's like detailing out how long it takes to create one character. It's detailing out dozens and dozens of like 10th level characters. That took a couple of days.
A couple of days, yeah.
I did that with 3rd edition when I did the Redhurst Academy of Magic. And I was a guy who knew what he was doing with D&D in those days. And we had to stat out like 20th level mages, right? And it took me half a day for each one of them, just sitting in an office working for somebody else going, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of math, right? And the problem is there's a right answer. So if you screw it up, somebody's going to say, no, right here, They'll
find the math error.
Exactly.
So as a source book, I think of character classes, equipment, skills. What are some of the core tenets of the book, that it would add to like an existing 5e campaign if somebody wanted to take this and put, Dragon Mountain into their campaign? What kind of optionality does it add as a source book, as a reference for somebody that's already running a game that wants to include the city and the denizens of it into their game?
Right. Well, one of the things we did there, I'll let Marty answer about the mechanic parts, but one of the things when I was doing this originally, I wanted to come up with a setting you could basically plug into or onto any other setting, right? So if you have a map of your campaign world and there's a place that says, here there be dragons, right? Or a blank spot or whatever, suddenly it's here there be zombies. And that surrounds Dragon Mountain. It could be an island, it could be someplace separated by a river or a mountain range or whatever. And as long as you have a blank spot in it, you can just drop that right in over there. And those people have been isolated for centuries. Now you're going to discover them somehow. So you could actually start out a fresh campaign there if you want. But if you have an existing ongoing campaign, it's actually fairly simple to travel there, right? You can either go overland or actually the Wizards Academy, known as the Academy of Arcane Apprenticeships. I named it AAA because I was an idiot and I can never remember how it works. Because I thought it was funny. What the hell was I thinking? But they have dirigibles that come in and travel from other parts of the world occasionally too, and do research trips. So you might meet somebody from there in your own world that might lure you over and say, hey, we got some jobs for you. Hey, do you like killing zombies? We got zombies. Come on down. But mechanically, Marty, I think, did a good job with it too. You really updated a whole lot of stuff. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing we wanted to do was focus on the setting. I mean, there are a bunch of new mechanics in this, like with the gunplay and with converted characters and items and stuff. But as far as making changes to like the overall 5e mechanical framework, there aren't many additions. We added a new class,
Right.
And we added a couple new races, and we changed the way that racial traits work slightly. But overall, more of what's detailed in the book is how you can like fit existing characters and existing like classes into this world, rather than how classes change or should change
Right.
for the world. Because we don't want people to have to learn like a whole bunch of new systems for the setting. We want the setting to work on its own,
Right.
And to be modular, to be something that you can slip in like that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The stories as they approach each system kind of deform around the system, so to speak. The system is the skeleton, and the stories kind of wrap themselves around that. And D&D and Pathfinder and Cypher system are all slightly different structures. So the expression that changes the story as it comes out, the background as it comes out. We actually have a list here on the Kickstarter page, but talks about for mechanical stuff. It says an entirely revamped racial system, including 16 playable races, featuring 2 entirely new ones, mermen and beastmen, brand new character class, plus rules to make standard 5e classes fully compatible with the setting, 14 new character backgrounds, cults as new organizations within Dragon City, guidelines for handling religion in the city, every single magic item, monster, and NPC from original Shotguns and Sorcery, and all of its supplements converted to 5e. Revamped gunplay rules, including at least a dozen new guns and weapons, loads of campaign hooks, and blah, blah, all sorts of different background stuff as well. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, even if you don't end up using the background, there's a lot of good crunchy stuff in there that you might want to transfer over to a similar kind of game. And hopefully that, I know a lot of people, when you buy this stuff, you're transforming it over to your own personal campaign. So you're just mining it for ideas, right? So we've got lots of mechanical ideas and lots of story ideas there for you as well.
Yeah, as the resident GM for our group, I tend to do a lot of that, mining other materials for things to use. So
it's a long-standing tradition. Right?
So hopefully Troy and Josh don't listen too closely, just in case. But yeah, I mean, looking through the campaign, I think it just looks like a book that is going to be just chock full of stuff to use, and a pretty good size. I think we talked a little bit about obviously the Kickstarter, and I think you mentioned on the page that ultimately it'll be available via the Kickstarter, then through drive-through. Is that correct?
That's right.
For kind of like what's their print to
Print
their
on
like
demand.
direct print, but it won't really have most likely won't have like a full distribution to retail.
Now, I'm not planning on selling it through the 3-tier distribution system that we have in the venture gaming industry. I've done that before with other stuff, and as much as I am a big fan of this, and I hope the backers are and everything else, not every game store in America wants to carry a third-party Dungeons and Dragons source book, right? And I don't really see the need to try to push that in every store. So instead, I want to go directly to consumers. We actually do have a retail backing level in the Kickstarter as well.
Like a pledge level for
yeah, we've had 7 retailers step up so far and pledge over $200 each to be able to get in on this, and they can add more to it as they go along later on. But they get a certain set of the books. Like they'll get 5 of the original book or the regular book and 1 of the deluxe book as a package, and then they can add more on after that at 50% off. Most of the times when you sell books to stores, they get 50% off, but then you're selling through distribution, it gets another 10%.
Takes a cut.
So as
there,
the creator, you're only actually getting 40% of the retail cost of the book. And out of that, you got to take all your development costs and printing costs and mailing costs and everything else. So it adds up pretty quickly. It's a lot easier to make money on Kickstarter where you're selling directly to people, right? Because then you get 100% of the cost. Well, 90% after Kickstarter takes its bit and the credit card processing place takes its bit. But a lot of that happens when you're selling to other people anyway. So you make a good chunk more money, and that means that it goes directly in the pockets of the people who are creating the game, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to print we're going to do a full-on print run for this. So we'll have web printing, as they call it, right? Where it's actually done in a proper printing press. for the basic book or the standard hardcover. And then we're also going to do an exclusive hardcover, a deluxe edition hardcover, which retails for $100. And that's going to have a leatherette cover on it, black, leatherette with a gold foil stamp with the logo. And so far we've unlocked a marker ribbon for it. We're looking at doing gilt edges. So you have the gold edges on it. It's going to look more like a Bible from when I was growing up as a kid in Catholic school. And then the next step, we're going to try to do like a leatherette dragon skin kind of embossing on it too. So it'll be something special. It's the kind of thing you want to put on the shelf and people will say, hey, that looks cool. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And those will not be available after this. I mean, if there might be a small overrun, because every time you do printing, they tell you it can be plus or minus 20%. So you always over ask by 20. And then if they hit over that, then you got more, right? So if we have extras, we'll sell those. But once those are sold, then we're done, right? Those won't be available through print on demand or stores or anywhere else. So if you like the collector stuff, that's where you go. So,
go get it now.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you just want the other book, great. I mean, the web print one will be at a better quality than the print on demand one, but the print on demand ones are pretty good these days, actually. However, they're expensive. Like right now, we're selling this book for $60, and the print on demand version is probably going to be like 75, right? Because print on demand just ends up being more expensive, and of course, the last year has even gotten more expensive over
the shipping piece of things.
Yeah, and shipping is a big
supply
problem.
shortages. Yeah,
I'm looking at a lot of different printers, but I got a really good price from a printer in Tennessee, and we're going to be shipping stuff through Atlas Games, which is up in Duluth, Minnesota, right?
Got a good friend who works for Atlas. So
that's fantastic. I love Atlas, right?
Yeah.
They're great friends of mine from way back.
Yeah, Travis Winter does a lot of their sales.
Very cool. Yeah. I hear from him occasionally. John Nephew is one of my oldest buddies in the industry. I've known him for many, many years. And I was actually there when he met his wife, Michelle, who helps run the company with him now. They do a great job.
Awesome.
We were guests at UW Platteville. We were at PlattCon, and Michelle was doing her master's or doctorate there. I forget which. So that's when they met. It was good times. But we're going to print. The funny part is the printer is actually, so far, assuming we use this printer.
I was going to ask if you're going to say what the printer is. You always say it with such excitement.
I think it's hilarious. Right? What are you using for a printer? We're using Jostens, right? Which prints like half the yearbooks in America.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can get like a class ring to go with it.
Class ring, yeah.
Stretch
That'd
goal,
be
right?
great if they could do a shotguns and sorcery class ring. Dragon Mountain University.
The thing about Jostens is they're really good at printing short run, full color hardcover books. They do it all across America every year. And it's like, oh yeah, role playing game, short run, full color hardcover. Okay.
Huh.
Yeah.
It was actually AEG who taught me that trick about 15 years ago. They're like, yeah, we're printing a lot of stuff through Jostens.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
Why the hell not?
I had no idea.
I mean, it's usually cheaper to print in China nowadays, but then with the shipping issues with China and the print and the global supply chain issues, really becoming troublesome. Atlas will be happy to tell you about that. John's often on Twitter. He was actually on NPR a couple months ago talking about how that's screwed things up, where shipping containers that used to cost $3,000 now costing like up to $30,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? So you can imagine what that does to your cost when you're suddenly you have an extra $27,000 you have to cough up for a product that you thought you were making a good profit on. So we're trying to avoid those problems.
Well, we've talked about that a lot too. Like, just the pricing that people want to see on games, board games, card games, role-playing games. When you think about what you get out of an RPG book, like, a group of people that can use it, what it should be worth versus what kind of the acceptable price point is right now. There's this disparity between the fun you get, the time you can use it, and what it allows you to do versus what the internet or the people that are critiquing price points
everybody wants their entertainment to be free, right?
Right.
The problem is if it's free, then the people who are making it can't make a living at it, and they stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like anybody in the role-playing gaming industry, with the possible exception of Wizards of the Coast and Paizo, is making big bank on this stuff, guys. We're doing it because we love it, because it's a hobby we adore, and because we have fun with it. And I've made a decent living at doing games, but honestly, most of my money nowadays comes from doing video games and novels, and like I'm doing the Marvel tabletop game too, right? Which I'll probably make some decent money at, because it's being published by Marvel, which is not a license, so they can afford to do decent things. But it's definitely not like you're not rolling in cash as you start shipping stuff out the door. It's just not that way. And honestly, they should be probably priced the same way that textbooks are, right? And when you go to college, you're like, holy shit, textbooks cost so much money. And it's because they're a limited print run for a limited audience. They're hardcover, have to be high quality. They should probably be priced like that, which means every role-playing game book should probably be $100 to $150, which is kind of soul crushing in a way.
Yeah.
But
you're talking
just
about
in those terms. Go ahead.
You're talking about hours of enjoyment per dollar. You take a big book. Take a big book like this one. If you're really gonna squeeze it, you get 100, 200 hours.
Oh, sure.
Out of a book. Of a big book. Yeah.
That's like $1 an hour. Come on.
Yeah.
Right?
Plus the number of players at that table. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the other thing.
Amortize that across everybody. It adds up pretty quick. Honestly, tabletop gaming is the cheapest form of entertainment in the world in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
The other secret, of course, is that you only need the first basic book, and then you can do whatever the hell you want, right? You can make it all up after that. Honestly, if you're a good game designer, you don't have to pay anything. You make it all up yourself anyway. But it's fun to be part of the community that's working on these things and doing stuff together, right? That's really the reason that I think a lot of this stuff works so well. It's the reason the OGL for the Open Game License for D&D did so well too. It said everybody wants to make something, come on and make something. We're able to take advantage of that for this book here, which is a lot of fun.
Before we leave Shotguns and Sorcery and the Kickstarter and into just a few kind of closing questions, is there anything else about the world, the game, the book, the art, a character somebody should check out? What are you kind of the parting comments for
we have some pretty amazing artwork in it. You can see it on the Kickstarter page. This is actually the cover for the new book, right? I actually had this done up as a game screen that I was using at Gamehole Con.
Very cool.
Pop your own things in there. Had these printed up as photos at Walgreens.
Yep.
But the artwork's fantastic. It's Jeremy Muller who did all the artwork for the novel covers and for the role-playing game products. Does amazing work, right? We got a lot of great artwork in there. Marty and I, this is a passion project for us. We really adore it. We got a great team with Rob Schwab coming on now too. These are people I'm excited to work with and do stuff with and proud to be doing stuff with. And I think people are going to be excited when they read it too. Part of what you get when you back the project as well is you get a free ebook copy of the Shotguns and Sorcery Omnibus, which is all the fiction that's been written for it to date, right? So it's 3 novels, 2 short stories, and a novelette that you get to go along with it, help you get in the mood, frame it all, make sure you're all on the same page, you know what's going on, and get excited about it. You're also going to get a free, because we cracked one of the stretch goals, get a free copy of the comic book, which hasn't been released to the public yet, was released to the backers of the previous Kickstarter, and now for you guys as well.
Awesome.
So you get a 22-page full-size comic book that I wrote that Jeremy and his team did the artwork for, and it's fantastic and fun. And we're going to release some other stuff for stretch goals as well, but we're trying to limit the stretch goals so it's not the kind of stuff where it's like, and now we're going to add 6 other books and it's going to take 3 years to produce and all that kind of stuff. We want to get this in your hands as soon as possible. I think we should be done with have the book hopefully out as a PDF maybe in January, right? As early as January. Wow. And assuming everything goes well, which of course it won't, which is the reason I have it down as shipping in August. Because if you put out in January, and then that gives us plenty of time to actually get the book printed too and get to people's hands hopefully early. Because nobody likes these things when they drag on forever. We want to move on to the next cool thing too, right? We'll do this. Help you get while you guys are enjoying this. Marty and I will bring up other new, cool, fun stuff to do and play, and hopefully we'll be able to be back for that kind of stuff too. Anything you want to add, Marty? I have a habit of hammering these answers in the ground, so it's not your fault.
I don't know. What do you want to add to it? I don't have any brew jokes prepared.
Okay, well, next time.
I'm sorry. I'm all out of jokes about brew.
Give it time.
Cool. So Matt, I got one question about the setting, and
Sure.
if I'm just starting to read the omnibus, so maybe no spoilers as I
okay.
But as I'm really intrigued by the world, and if I'm understanding the timeline right, you kind of did the world building way back when for the contest. Then you did the novels, and then it kind of turned into a game. Yep. Was there anything that it like as you did the novels, did that actually evolve the world, or did you pretty much have it, or just kind of interested in that? I'm always interested in that creative process of
essentially. I came up with the idea for Shotguns. What's that?
That original pitch doesn't even have the same name, right?
No, originally it was Shotguns and Sorcery, and the guys at Mongoose said, no, it's never going to sell. We can't do that. So it ended up being something called Shadow Knight, right? And it was a little bit darker, a little bit stranger. And honestly, when I started sitting down to write the novels, I threw all that out. I didn't pay attention to it. It was in the back of my head. I said, you know what? I know what the idea I want to have is. I'm not sure I'm ever going to do this as a game. So I'm just going to world build it for the story. I actually had somebody, the first Shotguns and Sorcery story, which is Friends Like These, somebody in England actually wrote me and said, can I use this to teach my creative writing class? Right. Because they thought it did such a good job of, I'm bragging here, of course, but they thought it did such a good job of exposition, right? One of the big problems with doing fantasy or science fiction or whatever is trying to give information to people without feeling like you're just, you need to read this 12-page treatise before you can walk in the door. And so you just kind of give it out to them and show, not tell, so to speak. And they really appreciated how I did it with that. So I was pretty proud of that. And I really enjoyed writing that story, that first one. It just fired off everything else from it. And then when we did the cipher system, it ended up being a little bit different. We do the 5th edition is a little bit different. I should dig out that old proposal. You've seen it, right, Marty?
No. I asked you to send it to me. I was like, you should include it in the Kickstarter. People would love to see that ancient proposal. And you were like, nah, nobody wants to see that. who would want to see something called Shadow Knight?
Because you know what? When we came up with it, I'm going, okay, I'm going to sell it to you guys. It's going to be fun. We're going to make a lot of money. But Shadow Knight is like the most generic name generator kind of name in the world, right? Take two of the coolest things to think about in fantasy: shadows and knights and dragons and clerics. Dragon cleric versus Shadow Knight. Yeah. That wasn't terribly. I thought Shotguns and Sorcery had a lot more flavor to it, right? Yeah. The only problem I have with the name is every now and then people say, "Is it a Western?" I'm like, "No, I've done enough Westerns, really." Yeah, I understand that you're thinking shotgun on a stagecoach, but that's not really it. Shotgun's like the guy comes around from behind the car and is leveling a shotgun at you. Oh no!
Troy or
to answer
Josh,
the question, I hope so.
No, it was good. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, Marty, I have a note to myself right here now. I will dig that out, see if I still have it. I never throw anything away, so I'm sure I do.
In the files somewhere.
Exactly.
All right. Let's move on to just a few kind of I don't even know what to call them. General mixed questions bag. Or mixed bag.
Yeah, grab bag. There we go.
Grab bag. So my son is a big fan of the Minecraft Dungeons book that you wrote, Rise of the Arch Illager. And I have not read this myself, so I'm going off of his question, but he did describe to me and he said, I think there's some foreshadowing and it ends with a cliffhanger, talks about a future adventure. And I said, I was like, yeah, I think that checks out. That appears to be a bit of a cliffhanger, maybe some foreshadowing to another story. But he said, ask Matt what happens. Where do they go and what happens? And I said, I don't know if he'll tell us. It might be a book or something else that we have to wait for, buddy, but I'll ask. And he wants to know what.
All right. Artie's dying. He knows the answer. What happens is you have to go play the game.
So sorry.
Right? The funny part, you can live. No, the whole thing is it's a prelude to the game, right? When they approached me to write this book and they're like, okay, what are we going to write? I'm like, I don't know. They told me what I could not do. I could not write the story of the game, right? Because they wanted people to be able to play through the game. And, part of it is because it's procedurally generating large chunks and they want it's going to be different from place to place, whatever. There's, signposts and goalposts, whatever. It's very much the same, but they wanted people to actually be able to experience that through the game. So they didn't want me to write the game. So I had to write something else. And they did not want me to use the characters that they provide you for the game either, because everybody comes up with their own characters. So I'm like, okay, I can't use the characters of the game. And I can't write about the game. What the hell do I write about? And they released a 2-minute teaser trailer for
an opening cutscene
for Minecraft Dungeons. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make a 200-page novel
based on a 2-minute opening cutscene.
I'll let him know that as he plays it on the Switch almost daily.
That's it. That is
writing
the story. That's
the
what
story.
Happens.
That's Arch Illager 2.
Yeah, exactly. Electric Boogaloo.
Quest for Curly's Gold.
But the funny part was, I don't know if you guys know Jeff Richard. He's the creative director of Chaosium these days, right? And he comes up to me at GameHole and he says, Matt, my son loves this book. He thinks I'm the coolest guy because I know you. This is a kid whose godfather is Greg Stafford, and his other godparent was Steve Perrin. Ken Rolston used to babysit for him, but he thinks you're the cool one. I'm like, okay, obviously you've raised this kid wrong. I don't know what you're telling me, but it's because those guys were always in his life. He always knew who the hell they were, right? And I'm just this mysterious guy who wrote a book based upon his favorite game that he plays. So it's very strange.
Yeah, well, I mean, talk about when I told Landon that we were talking to you tonight. He was incredibly excited because he recognized the name from his Minecraft books and from the Endless Quest books. And I know, Troy, you're experiencing Endless Quest.
I get emails or Facebook messages from people saying, "Holy shit, that's you! My kid's reading your book." I'm like, I haven't read it for 20 years. Okay, nice to see you.
So, and maybe I'll jump in the Endless Quest again. Yeah, I'm old, but I also have a 9-year-old daughter, and we've been working through the Endless Quest. And I was telling Ty before, actually, I'm enjoying, like, we played Tomb of Annihilation, and so going back on the cleric book, I'm like, oh, I'm reliving Cholt and going through all this stuff, which is really cool. And that I got my question there is what are the mechanics to actually through the Endless Quest? Is that like a giant? I don't know how you do it. Maybe is it a spreadsheet? Is it how do you get all that, like the construction?
Well, that's a tricky story. The way I did it was not the way I would have chosen to do it, right? But what happens is the guys at the publisher, it was Kings Road Publishing or Studio Press over in the UK and Candlewick in the US, but I worked with the guys in the UK. They wrote me and said, okay, we want you to do this. Can you work it all out? And then they sent me a page plan for it, which basically was all the pages of the book laid out and says, if you're on this page, then you go to this page or this page, right? And I couldn't understand a damn thing about it. So I actually had to sit down and make a flow chart for myself so I could actually see how everything went together. I couldn't visualize it otherwise. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. It makes sense if you're going through it on a page by page basis, but actually designing it, you have to understand the whole story and how it's going to spread out and where the ends are and everything else. So I made a flow chart for it, and it was the same for every book. Right? So they didn't want me to change. I'm like, can't I change things? They're like, no, it's stuck now. And I'm like, oh my God. And the funnier part was that they wanted the ability to take the 128 page book and then do a 96 page black and white mass market edition, right? Which never happened, but they wanted the option for it. And they thought they'd sell them for like, $3 or whatever through Scholastic. And so you'll see parts of the book where there are not just 2 choices, but 3 choices, right? And those are the parts where I was able to take one part and just chunk the entire thing out of the book. So literally, if you took that 3rd choice out of the book, you would reduce it to 96 pages and nobody would ever know. The reader would never know that those pieces were missing. Now, in those places, obviously, that's not the good endings of the book. Right? You get slaughtered in every one of those. But for me, a lot of the fun of writing those is that the ending, the bad endings have to be just as much fun as the good ending, if not more so, right? Because you're going to run into a lot more of those, and they have to be just as entertaining and frustrating on top of it as the good ending is. Because what happens is you go, damn it, and then you flip back to where you were before you keep going. Right? Everybody in the world does that. It's no surprise. In fact, we tell the kids to do that. Mark your pages, kids. You never know what's going to happen. It's good.
So you've created and been involved with countless different projects and tons of nerdy realms, right? You're an author, editor, game designer, all sorts of different hats. With all the awesome things you've done in your career, what feels most comfortable? Like what realm and what hat you're wearing feels most comfortable to you?
I tell you, Shotguns and Sorcery is really comfortable for me, which is one of the reasons I keep coming back to it, I think. This is like the blend of my 2 favorite things in the world when I was growing up. 2 favorite authors were J.R.R. Tolkien and Raymond Chandler, right? So hardboiled detective fiction and high fantasy. So for me, that's just a good crossroads for me to sit at. I always enjoy doing that. I often end up, superheroes are another big thing for me. I learned how to read on Spidey comics from the Electric Company when I was like 3 years old. And I've been a big fan of Marvel and DC my whole life. And so I often come back to that. But, one of my favorite things to do is write novels, and I haven't had a chance to do that for about a year now because I've been so busy with other stuff. Just because it's a very different experience because I grew up writing role playing games, and that you're just you're providing tools for other people to tell the story. When you're writing a novel, you have to tell the entire thing, but then you get to ignore all the stuff that is not necessary to whatever you're writing, right? So instead of coming up with every possible permutation, you're just coming up with the basic stuff. I'm very comfortable doing that. Comic books are probably the most challenging goddamn thing you're ever going to write, because a comic book is it's like an extended pictorial haiku, right? In that, there's 22 pages and there's only a limited number of pages or panels on each page. And when you're building action, you build up from one side, you're over here, you're trying to build up over to this side. At the bottom of the right-hand page, that's when like, oh shit, what's going to happen? And you turn the page to find out. And oh my God, it's the splash page. To engineer all that into a comic book and make it seem like it's just natural and flows well is a real challenge. And I enjoy doing it, but it's a puzzle to solve on a physical level as well as on a story level. And then matching the two up there is always it's fun. I enjoy doing it. I got to write a year's worth of Magic the Gathering comics for IDW at one point. And that was a kick and a half. Plus I've written a few other ones over the years, and they're always lots of fun.
Plus the Shotguns and Sorcery comic. That's what you're forgetting.
Shotguns and Sorcery comic, which we did mention, which is coming to backers with if you back at any level, you get the comic as well. So there you go.
Awesome.
It's all good fun.
All right.
But,
So
I mean, for me, the main thing is telling stories, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm working on a comic book, a role-playing game, a novel, a video game, whatever else. It all comes down to telling stories and kind of being true to the characters that are there and the world, and helping it feel like it's authentic, even though it's a manufactured thing, right?
awesome. All right, Marty, I mentioned this, I think, right before we actually started recording. Being a University of Wisconsin fan of all things Badgers, now you went to school there. Are you still in Madison, or have you moved out of Madison after?
I'm still in Madison, but I graduated about a year and a half ago.
All right. So let's hear it. What is your favorite game store in Madison? It's a great town for gaming. There's a ton of different places. Maybe you're contractually not able to tell us, but do you have a favorite place to go or to game, to shop?
I should probably plug On Board, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Better give the right answer, kid.
Yeah. He's giving me the stink eye. Yeah, On Board is a really good place to go.
The reason that he says that is because I'm Bored is run by Brian Winter, who is one of my college roommates from Michigan.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I mean,
it's all we all know each other. It's just how it works.
I'm Bored. Excellent.
Noble Knight's very good too. Pegasus Games is a place I grew up.
Pegasus, yeah.
Which is no longer. No, actually, they redid, didn't they? They rebooted with some new crew. I think somebody bought them up. Lori and the crew there actually shut the whole thing down. And then somebody bought up the name and some of the assets like a week or two later. I've not been to the new place at all. So it all happened during the pandemic. I'm like, well, good luck.
Yeah, tough time for game stores.
It has been. But I'm Bored has been doing great. And Brian runs a great store. In fact, he opened another one out in Sun Prairie, right? The original one's in Middleton, and the new one's out in Sun Prairie.
Yeah, both of the On Boards are really nice, clean places.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so then, if you were anything like me, you didn't always enjoy going to the library, but I had my place where I went to study that wasn't in my dorm room or apartment, where I needed to get away from distractions and just focus. Were you a Memorial Library guy or a Helen C. White College Library guy?
I was a Helen C. White guy. It's right down the street. I mean, it's right down the street. The convenience, you can't beat the convenience. I mean, the selection might not be as big as Memorial, but you can't beat the convenience when you're living right down the street. They got lots of comics at Helen C. White.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they added board games to Helen C. White.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You can rent a board game out of Helen C. White. So,
oh man.
I liked it there.
Yeah. Fantastic. And then the last question is, are you a fan of Ian's Pizza?
I would.
Yes.
I live next to a much better pizza place. Let me put it that way.
So which one is that?
I live literally on top of a Salvatore's
South.
pizzeria.
Oh, nice.
Fig and pork belly pizza, and they used to do a carbonara. I mean, man. Yeah, okay.
Stuff.
Good point there.
But he has had Ian's and enjoyed it. His brother Kenny
Yeah.
loved Ian's pizza. Kenny's also going to UW right now.
Awesome.
So he's a sophomore there.
I was a frequent flyer at Ian's. It
It's
was
good stuff.
a couple blocks away from there, the one on Francis. So years ago, though, long ago. It's crazy how that campus changes every few years. When I get back to Madison, just new buildings and new stuff. But whenever I get a chance to talk Madison, I do it. So Troy and Josh are just kind of letting me.
It's a great city. It really is.
Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Absolutely. All right. I think that brings us to the end of our scripted questions of the show, guys.
Okay.
But what I'd like to do is just give you a chance to talk about where people can. So obviously the Kickstarter going on now, but otherwise, where can anyone go to find you guys? Or if
Sorry,
there's
I
any
dropped
other
out for a
commentary?
second.
Oh,
Okay.
no
you're
problem.
back.
I'm back.
You're back.
All right. I was just saying, where can people go to find everything you do,
Sure.
web presence, so on and so forth?
All right. For the Kickstarter, you can go to Kickstarter and punch it in, but you can also just go to shotgunsandsorcery.com. And I've got a redirect set up that'll take you directly to the Kickstarter page. If for general stuff, you want to go to forbeck.com, FORBECK.com. And that's got a list of not all the stuff I've ever done, but a bunch of this for the last decade or so. You can find me on Twitter at mforbeck, and on Instagram at mforbeck, and on Facebook at Forbeck. So, how about you, Marty? Marty's not as much on the social media stuff. He grew up with these like, what the hell are you people doing?
No. I mean, social media is poison. If you can avoid it, do. And I mean, I can't avoid it entirely, but I try to. You can find me on Twitter, although I don't use it. You can still hit me up there. At Marty Forbeck, and my email is marty@forbeck.com. It's literally my name with an @ in it. My dad set up emails for all of us kids with that are very, very unsecured emails, very hackable emails with our name.
Don't tell the world. Now, when we were starting out, I had to make passwords as easy enough for the little ones to understand. Now we're all secure. Mark. It's all Gmail 2FA. Come on.
Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to come on. We certainly will be, getting this out here before the end of the Kickstarter so that everyone can listen and find out, and directing them there as well. But thank you both so much for the time, and best of luck here as we get into the final days to see this take off, and then can't wait to get a copy in the wild and subject my players to all the goodies.
Well, thank you guys for having us. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you tonight.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. And this is where we wrap up the episode. Had a great conversation with Matt and Marty Forbeck, designers and authors of the Shotguns and Sorcery 5th edition source book that's active on Kickstarter now. Make sure you get out there and back it before that ends this weekend. I think on the 16th, evening of. A couple different pledge levels, some awesome content, but it was really great to sit down and chat with them. As to our show, you can certainly find us on iTunes. Hit us up Twitter at Playin Slayin Show. Find us basementofdeath.com, where Troy meticulously posts every episode with incredible show notes, which we will also link to the Kickstarter and some other things this time.
Are you? I'm pledged. Are you pledged?
I am. All
right.
I pledged this afternoon.
There we go. Josh, and no peer pressure. Just
No, I'm pledging right after recording here.
Oh, okay. That's good.
All right. So talked about website, Twitter, all the emails. Hit up the intern at basementofdeath.com, see what he's been up to. But for all of us at Playin and Slayin, once again, thank you to Matt and Marty Forbeck. Just an awesome discussion. And keep the dice rolling, the drinks on ice. And no matter what, keep playing and slaying. I was thinking a little bit today about a D&D campaign and wanting to set it in Dragon Mountain, but I want all of my players to be zombies on the outside of the wall.
Ooh.
And you're trying to break in to the city and getting attacked by people with shotguns as you just try to find the weak points in the wall. It would be a very short campaign, probably only one session. But you're also at the table. You're not allowed to communicate in anything other than moans or grunts.
Can I be a rogue zombie?
No, you can just be a zombie.